Are you aware of the Shiza-Niyama Index?
Probably an advisor that has a client-centric mindset.
The fact that many of these sectors have incredibly strong
and also create a bit of distance between the investment process.
Talking about CPD, I always refer to it as continuous.
I'm part of the legal counsel from 91 Asset Management.
You've got to be moving towards something, not away from something.
The concept of being an influencer or having influence in your network.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this webinar, our April segment, which is basically going to talk a bit about client segmentation specifically this morning. And the broader topic, it should fit into your practice management sections, and we will also upload this under the practice management side on our website. So that's just to give you a bit of brief of why we are hosting this morning's session. And then for those of you who are not familiar with my guest speaker this morning, I'd like to introduce you to Francois du Toit. Actually, if you are not familiar with him, you're probably not familiar with his amazing YouTube channel. That's actually quite sad because I think you should all get onto PROpulsion and go and subscribe to that YouTube channel. So this is a bit of a free marketing for Francois this morning, but go and subscribe to that. It's Friday mornings. There's absolute amazing PROpulsion sessions, and PROpulsion also does a lot more than just the Friday morning segments. But so Francois is joining me. He's the founder and director of PROpulsion. They are all about empowering financial planning, business owners, advisors, and also their support teams to grow and thrive, which I think is quite amazing. He holds a Bachelor of Commerce in Risk Management, a postgrad diploma in Financial Planning, and he's a certified financial planner, which I think is really so ideal when he then needs to talk to our audience members this morning who are financial planners. And then I asked him just before we joined, how long has he been in the industry? I wanted to add it to his bio. And yeah, he's been in the industry since 1998. So I also think he has a fair amount of experience. He's seen it all. But as we said this morning, we all still learning. So Francois, thank you so much for joining me this morning. So I think I'm going to start with a little bit of a definition that I read on segmentation. And it says that capitalizing on proper client segmentation can create extraordinary client experiences and streamline your communication and support so you can continue to focus on your firm's growth. So I read a couple of definitions, and that one really popped out for me in terms of what I think segmentation could probably be or stand for, to be defined as. Now, Francois, you recently did a fun ways to segment, personalize, and wow your clients. That was your specific topic for the morning, and I thought it was such a great topic. And I think I want to kick off then the session to ask you, why do we need to segment our client base? Maybe not even just as advisors, any business basically that has a client, client list or distribution list or deal with clients. Why do we need to segment our client base? And what is in your mind the benefits perhaps? It's a bit of a broad question, but you can all just pop it in there. But yeah, so maybe you can start off with that.
Thank you very much, Tanya. I would equate it something to like, when you go to like a sports event, I'm sure that like most people have been to some kind of a live sports event, whether it was when your child is playing at school, or whether you were maybe when you were at school and playing in a netball game or a rugby game or something like that. There's a lot of shouting going on. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of all of this. And it's almost for me the same in business where, if we don't segment, we don't think about who we want to connect with and who we want to attract and who we want to talk to and what we want to do for them. It becomes like that sporting event where there's so much screaming going on and everybody's obviously happy and they're all cheering on. We don't know which team's for because we just can't make it out, but we know we're there. And it almost feels to me like it's the same thing in business. It's if we're not very, very clear on who we serve, what their specific things are. And here's the interesting thing when it comes to segmentation. I think the big reason why many puts off doing segmentation, or when they do segmentation and then stop basically somewhere through the process, or they do it once and never look at it again, is just simply because it can get very complex very, very quickly, right? The issue is that there's so many things that we can look at when we want to segment. And we can get a little bit more into how you can go about segmenting. But at the heart of it, segmentation is about really honing your communication and your messaging to those clients so that they know you're talking to them and not to somebody else. It's not a screaming match if I'm actually having a proper conversation with someone. But then also from there, if I'm talking to you, I've got to be able to align my value proposition to that. I've got to align my servicing to that. Everything needs to be aligned to that, because what I'm telling you, I need to deliver on. And if you don't see the value, then we're not going to connect. I'm not going to attract you to my business. And it's going to become very hard to build a business that's really focused and very good at what you do, because we're trying to be everything to everybody.
And I heard you now mention the word value proposition. So do you think that's your starting point? Is that you first, we're not talking specifically about value propositions this morning, but do you need a value proposition in order for you to actually do the client segmentation? Is it something that stands apart from one another? Is it something that's actually linked to one another, aligned with one another? How would you describe that?
I think often when you think about, like I talk about the 5 components of a business, right? And the very first one of that is actually to create value. So you have to create a value proposition. What am I going to do for people? Right. But then from there, so that would almost be like an overall overarching, this is what we would love to do. And this is the value that we could be adding. But the next question to that, before you can even start, because delivering the value comes way down the line. There's other things that happen in between. You have to sort of create that value proposition in the first thing, but that's just the starting point. It's not the final value proposition. It's not the value proposition for every client as well. So, but you have an idea of what you want to do. You have an idea of who you want to serve and the value that you can add and want to add to them, the impact that you want to have, in other words. And then from there, you go and start saying, okay, but now there are many different people. I always use this sort of example to say that, let's just say that you decide that you only work with business owners, for example. Not just because somebody ticks the box of being a business owner doesn't mean that they are a good fit for me. It doesn't mean that it's somebody that I can add value to, because there's a lot of things that we'll talk about probably this morning that come into play and that we need to consider in our process to say, well, Tanya is a fantastic business owner to work with, Francois not so much, even though both tick the box. And traditionally, we've always been thinking about, I want to work with business owners, but there's many layers to that. And that's the thing where the value proposition and segmentation, I believe, is intrinsically linked to each other. The one can't go without the other, because otherwise both, it's almost like shouting again at the sporting match, saying like, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream. But everybody's so entrenched in other things that they don't hear that unless you're an ice cream lover. Because most people at that match is probably not an ice cream lover, believe it or not. You only want to be talking to the ones who are ice cream lovers, because they will probably hear ice cream amongst the shouting, which is the amazing thing. So in my view, Tanya, they are really linked to each other. You can do them independently, but at some point you've got to link them, because that's where the power will be.
I don't know if this is a myth or if it's, I don't work actively as a financial advisor in a practice to be able to know this, but maybe it is that it's very time consuming to go and do your client segmentation. And now I'm specifically thinking of maybe advisors on this call that's been in the industry for a very long time. And now you have to almost ask them, go back to the drawing board. It's always so nice. All of these things we talk about seem so nice for the young advisor that's joining the industry. You can just start fresh and get everything right from the get-go. And perhaps not always those that has been in the industry for a very long period of time. Is it a time-consuming process? Does it need to be a time-consuming process? Are there tools to use for advisors? Let's maybe talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one. It will be different for different people. But at the end of the day, anything where we work on our business is time-consuming. And I think maybe it feels like it's time-consuming because it's time we're spending not with clients. It's time we're spending not working, right? And I think that's why it feels so time consuming. Now, here's a big lesson that I learned from starting the show. And we went live for 75 days in a row in lockdown. And the amount of things that just an hour a day, the amount of things that we were able to create, obviously 75 hours of content, 75 lessons learned, around more than that, probably 350 lessons learned through that process about what to do and what not to do and how to become more effective and more efficient. But here's the thing. Do you know how quickly that's 75 days is long? Like it's a month and a half. So imagine you spend a month and a half, but I mean, you're not spending 8 hours a day, week after week for 6 weeks to be able to get there. What you are doing is you're working an hour a day on that. And the one big lesson that I learned from that is when you break it down, you just do a little bit. The thing is we're impatient. So we want the result right now. We want the things to happen immediately. And that's what makes it feel so long. But you do a little bit every day before you know it. You know, it's almost like I'm reading a book at the moment. Like the first time ever I'm reading a storybook. I'm trying to get away from all the personal development and all the other amazing things that I always sort of get entrenched in. But I'm reading this book and it's almost a 400-page book, right? The moment I went past half, it felt like, oh, wow, now things are going quicker and quicker and quicker. Now I can't wait so I can start my other series of books that I want to read, because I said I can't read that unless this is finished. And it's sort of the same process that we need to follow, you know, when we're doing segmentation for our business. It's a process, and work on it a little bit every day. And also pull your team into it and also get their input. But if you do a little bit every day, before you know it, in a quarter, like 3 months from now, you're going to have a fantastic segmentation. I mean, you haven't had it probably for how many years? So does it matter that it's going to take 3 months? But what you don't want to do is spend every single minute, although you could maybe then get it done in a week, maybe 3 days. But there's other things that you need to do in your business as well. So break it down, then it doesn't have to take that long.
It's interesting. We just had a marketing webinar with where one of our guests, Tim Slatter, mentioned a very similar strategy. He said 3 minutes, 3 times a week. And you know, just to create content for that purpose. But it resonates almost to what you're saying with you take something that seems like a daunting task, you break it up, you commit, and then you just get stuck in and actually do it. But maybe, I mean, I know, you know, Francois, I've known you now for quite some time, and I know you as a tech guy. So I don't know, do you maybe have some tips for the guys? Are they, I would almost want to say, from a practical perspective, tools that you've picked up maybe over time, or stuff that you know of that they could use? I mean, I'm still old school in the sense I will go to an Excel sheet, I will pull in all my clients there in column A. In column B, you'll start typing them and categorize them, I don't know, according to their AUM or whatever the case may be. What would be your, you know, if you were to guide someone or to go and sit in their practice, do you think there are certain technological stuff that they can maybe use, tools and other tech?
It's actually very interesting to me that you're mentioning the word Excel just now. I'll tell you why, because just yesterday I had a conversation with somebody that we were talking about AI and all sorts of things, obviously, because that's top of mind and I spend a lot of time on that. And obviously AI is an answer, right? If you have the data, you can really interrogate that data. And the big difference with AI today is that usually the data, if we analyze the data, it's backwards looking, right? Most of the time. But now you bring that and you add AI, you can now start predicting things of what might happen going forward. So there's a lot that you can do if you have the right data. The challenge we often sit with is that in smaller businesses, it's harder to get the data sometimes, and also then to have it in the right format, because we don't have the experience, the expertise, the resources to make that happen. And sometimes we also unwilling to outsource that to other professionals to get it right for us, because we don't see the value. Like we're almost in a profession where we want to see the value first before we pay for it. You know, it's that kind of thing. And that's why we try and educate people to say, this works. You just got to go and do it, and you'll see the return. But Excel is probably the best technology available for any small business owner. This particular person said to me that, you know, it doesn't, like, long before you need AI, you probably need to know how to use Excel, because you can use it for so much. And you think about something like Copilot that's at the moment now integrated into Excel in any event. If you have Copilot, you know, it will work there. The thing about Excel, it helps you structure your thinking and everything, right? And you can start and slice and dice some of the data that's in there. But I think long before we get to the technology itself, you need a philosophy for your segmentation. That's very important. Like, what are the things that are important to you long before because one of the ways you can do this is to pull in all the data from your CRM, from your AUM, and maybe from your commissions, because those are really the three main sources. If you want to start looking at where's my client base at the moment, you need those three things. You need the data in your CRM, and let's just assume for a second that your data is fantastic. Okay. The CRM is the first source, because that should be your source of truth. Usually the things that are missing from those CRMs are my assets under management, and also then some assets under management and my commissions, fees, income, that kind of stuff. So when you have that information, because the one thing you need is who's my client, and I need to then understand, well, who that client is, very importantly, but then also we need to understand what are we doing for them at the moment. And there's sort of a few things that we can then gather from that process. The one thing is we can know how profitable a client is for us, because this is the big thing, Tanya. You imagine this. So you're holding an appreciation event for your client and for your clients, and you invite your clients, and let's just say all of them pitch for this event. It's a fantastic event, and you stand up on stage and you say, "We just really want to thank you for being clients." But what we do want to do, we want our top 10, 20, 50 clients to stand up, and you sort of name them by name, and they stand up. And we just say then to the rest of the clients, like, can we just give them a massive round of applause because they've been subsidizing your services that we've been giving you. So that's always like a telling thing for me to say, well, it's fantastic. Obviously, these clients are happy because they're paying a lot less, but getting the same. These clients are going to go like, why are they clapping at me? Why am I paying for this? So that's probably the thing that's going to happen in a scenario like that. And that's why it's so important to understand where your profitability is. There's a lot of things that come at play. I don't think like a half an hour, our webinar is enough for us to unpack that, but it's really important just to think about your business as a business, and just say, well, what is my criteria going to be? What's my philosophy going to be? What are the things? Anyway, I'm transgressing a little bit from what I wanted to say. So when we have that information, then we can start to say, okay, profitability. We can also start to see, to sort of get a sense of the loyalty, how strong the loyalty is. We can probably even get a sense of how much somebody is promoting us, in the sense of advocacy. So we can sort of start looking at that as well. And also, funny enough, one of the things that I think is the most neglected aspect of segmentation, because we often go, how much assets under management? Because there's many different ways we can segment. So there's assets under management. So my top clients are the people who've got the most assets under management with me, or the most number of products, or whatever that clarification is, or it's the people that I earn the most money from. Those are that's the way I want to segment, or, however. But the problem that you'll find is that often we then don't see the potential in clients, because there's sort of three types of scenarios that you can have with a client. The one is that, let's just say you earn 10,000 Rand a year from a client, but that's every single Rand that you can ever earn from that client. So they're giving you every single spare Rand that they've got in their wallet comes to you. I mean, that's an important client, right? Because in their minds, all their money is going to you from that perspective. Then you have another type of client that's actually able to give you 100,000, but you're getting 10,000, but they're never going to give you more than 10,000 ever. You're never going to grow that to the 100,000. Then you have somebody who could give you 50,000 or 100,000, but you're not getting a cent from them. You're getting very little from them. But that then could be a very high potential client. And the question that I want to ask through, if you look at your segmentation philosophy, will you be able to say, well, these clients, I should treat them like my A clients because there's potential. So think about a young professional, for example. There's not much earning at the moment, but over time there's massive earning potential. But there's a lot of other things that also needs to be in place. But I think that's why I wanted to lead with a philosophy and why that is so important. Because if you don't have a philosophy, you're going to be all over the place, and it will be very hard to decide where somebody fits into your segmentation. So that doesn't really answer your tech question. But I think Excel, Copilot, and obviously something like ChatGPT can really help coming up with certain things, and not to analyze the data. Because remember, that data is private and confidential, and you don't want to put something like that into ChatGPT. But what you can do is help you come up with a segmentation philosophy. You can help it to help define an ideal client or client personas, those kinds of things. It's really, really good at that.
I think your answer was actually good in a sense that it was more broad, because what you've touched on was also the types of, because now I'm imagining and, like visualizing this Excel sheet, because now already you're talking about what needs to be included. Commissions, the data from your CRM, your referrals, loyalty. And I think it talks a bit about, towards my next question in a sense, is that many of those things feel like it's the almost the quant side of it, right? So what do we do in terms of the behavioral side? Do you think with behavioral finance being a very huge, let's say, topic nowadays, especially in financial planning, we have, and maybe I should rephrase my question using this example. We have an advisor, and I hope he's on the call this morning, and he categorized or segmented his clients according to their brain profile. So he does these color charts, and he decides then, as he gets to know his client, or I'm not sure if he asks them, certain questions, but then he categorizes them according to that. Do you think there's value in also using behavioral elements in your segmentation to understand? I mean, you mentioned this in your PROpulsion as your intro, and I found it so interesting where you say, with some clients you just click, with others you don't. Sometimes things just go wrong for the one client. Feels like you have this dud that you got, like this client, everything goes wrong with them. So do you think there's value in behavioral elements as well?
Yeah, so the way that I view this is that there's possibly, there's three parts to it, but there's first two main parts, call them filters, if you will, that you want to put people through. And usually we start off with the part around what it is that they do. So that's the stuff like they medical professionals or business owners, entrepreneurs, teachers, they work for government, or whatever that criteria is. They've got to earn a certain amount of money, have a certain amount of assets, maybe. It's all these quantitative, factual things. So that's the first thing. And that's how we've been taught to segment for many, many years. Doesn't matter what kind of book you read on that. That's one of the elements. And that's important. But that also goes back to my point about that. Not all of those people are your ideal clients. So some you click with, some you don't. Some, everything goes right, some things, but some of them it's just a gemors, if you will. And you don't understand why. And it's because of that second element, I believe. And that's what I call the what. So the first one is what they do. The second one is who they are. And that's more the stuff about, does this person give me energy or do they drain my energy? Do these people, can they make decisions? Yes or no? Or at the very least, if you guide them and once they make that decision, it's about that they can make decisions on their own, but maybe it's just a case of they can make a decision. Even if you need to guide them, but then once they've made that decision, they stick to it. So they take action, right? So that's the thing. I still think the one thing that overrides, there's many other things that we can think about there. A friend of mine says, it's people I want to braai with. It's literally like, if I'm willing to invite you to a braai, then you're my type of client. And I think those kinds of things are important. I worked with somebody else who said, if you're somebody who leave the toilet seat up, we can't work with you. Literally, that's what they said on their website. So it's literally like these different things about what's important to you. So you've got to understand the kind of traits from people that you're happy to work with, and the traits that you refuse to work with. Not just not happy to, you should refuse to work with those. So now the last element of that, who they are, is do they see your value? Because they can tick all these boxes, but if they don't see that you are adding value or what you do could add value to them, they will always want to do it themselves. They will always complain about fees. Even if they're positive people, forward-looking, it's nice to be with them, you really enjoy it, and they tick all the other boxes. If they don't see your value, none of those other things matter. However, it doesn't mean you shouldn't have a relationship with them. So let me just be clear. This is not about having relationships or not. This is about servicing clients. Then the third element that comes from that is now, sure, Tanya, it's a myriad of things, because now I can start thinking about behavioral stuff, so within that, so if I've got my list of clients, now I can go and sort that, because now at least they're in the room, right? We let them in the door. We sort of opened in the movies, or usually in America, you see these bouncers opening the red velvet rope at the party, and then you can come in. So that's sort of what we've done. And now we need to understand that group of people who's in the room much better. And now it can be a myriad of things. So now you can say, well, these people are in, let's look at their behavioral stuff, because there's a certain way I need to work with them, and I need to understand my own so I can adapt. You can do it via whether they tech savvy or not. You can do it whether they want to be virtual or they want to be in person or hybrid. Do they care? So there's so many other things that we can sort of then start thinking about. But I think without those first two, this stuff doesn't matter. So unless you've gone through and very clear on the first two that I spoke about, the what they do and the who they are, the third level doesn't really work as efficiently as it could, but it is definitely valuable. You should have this because, again, if you have somebody who's not tech savvy, for example, you're going to send them WhatsApp messages and they won't get back to you. Like my wife, for example, she won't probably get back to you very, very soon because she's not inclined to that. Whereas I would probably be more responsive in that way. So it's small little things like that we need to understand. And probably on that note is like the reason why we want to do this and the behavior, they say segmenting by behavioral profiles, or you want to do it via whatever your criteria is that then you know how, where, and how to communicate with these clients, because that's ultimately what it's about. It's the way we communicate with them. And also don't forget about we can easily go and decide what we want to, how we want to communicate, and we think we know somebody, but ask them, how do you want me to communicate with you, etc. So also include the client in this and make sure that you really know and understand what's important to them. Because I think the dangerous thing we do sometimes is that we've had a relationship for a long time with the client, and then we feel like we know this client very well, but you compare the amount of time you've spent with them versus how long they've been a client. Literally spending time. You feel like you and I have gotten to know each other quite well, but how many times have we interacted for an extended amount of time, right? Versus, we've known each other now for 2 or 3 years, for example. It's suddenly a very, I don't know what the word is, but an eye-opening realization to have to say, but maybe I don't know them that well. And so much happens in the meantime.
Absolutely. And I think it was actually part of a question that was popping up was personalization has become such a huge trend, especially in the marketing arena. It's, you can do custom landing pages for clients. You can, your targeting and retargeting of audiences, those things that come at play. And now you already mentioned it. You said that if you build a good segmentation, it is also in a sense to know how to communicate with clients. And I think it's really a point to maybe highlight again, to understand that if, and I do this in my personal capacity as well, you send someone, like you mentioned, a WhatsApp that is not really inclined to that, they don't respond, you immediately take it on yourself as, what did I do wrong? Did I say something wrong? And maybe not everyone, I'm perhaps more sensitive to stuff like that, but it's in understanding that it's not their preference to have, WhatsApp communication, for instance. So do you think personalization in the marketing field, maybe not necessarily a segmentation question, but it's going to become more of a trend going forward?
Yeah, so last year at the summit that we held in August, we looked at the 6 major trends in financial planning worldwide. And hyper-personalization was the second biggest trend. And that's now where we can talk about tech, because without technology, you and I are not able to hyper-personalize at scale. You are able to personalize on a one-on-one conversation, but that's it. And just by having an email newsletter go out and saying, "Dear Francois," that's level 1. But there's many other levels of how we can and should personalize. And for me, hyper-personalization means I'm showing up at the right time in a way that you expect me, but you almost didn't expect me to show up, right? So it's about the timing, it's about the message, it's about the information in that message pertains to that client. And that's where we're going. And that's why I'm saying this is where data becomes so much more important and tech becomes so much more important, because you and I can't be sitting there looking for something on social media that changed in somebody's life. But you can use technology to pick up on these things and then alert you so that you can take action. And it's not necessarily you want to automate the communications and things. That's maybe some of it might work for that, some of it might not. But it is about having the information to say you should be speaking this. There was at one point I was sort of trialing HubSpot CRM many years ago, before lockdown. I was looking at HubSpot CRM, and it had this amazing functionality that is really sneaky, but it's brilliant. So just to give a sense of how you can be personalized and show up and do things like that. So with HubSpot, if I send you an email via the system, it comes from me, it's from Francois du Toit, all of that. But the moment you open that email, I actually get a notification on my desktop to say that Tanya just opened the email. And that means that in 5 or 10 minutes time, I can send you an email. "Hello, Tanya." So let's say I sent this yesterday or a week ago and you haven't opened, and suddenly I get this pop-up. Obviously, if I send it now and you open it now, I'm not necessarily going to do this, but I could then email you back and say, "Hi, Tanya, hope you're doing well. Checking in if you've got any questions on the email that I sent you." And what is Tanya going to do? She's going to respond, say, "Francois, you won't believe it. I just went through your email, da 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 da." But this is sort of just one very simple example of that kind of stuff, where that level of personalization showing up, almost when people least expect it, but it's the perfect time to show up. But then also, it goes back to being able to communicate with them, just provide information that's relevant to them at that time. So imagine that you see somebody, one of your clients on social media, you get an alert that, they announced that they're pregnant. You're not going to be the first person they're going to call, say, "Francois, guess what? We're pregnant." Like, you probably find that out when she's like 8 months in and you have a review meeting, and then you'll find out, say, "Oh, I didn't know." But imagine that you sort of find this out, and you don't just go like, "Oh, congratulations, I see on social media that like, that's creepy." But let's just say that you start sending them a little bit more content and education around things that you should consider when becoming a parent for the first time, or maybe now suddenly, you heard that you're having twins, and there's a very specific challenges that come with that. Let's just say that you start feeding them a little bit more around that. So that's the kind of personalization that I'm talking about. Also, you now know this information long before. Now, obviously, something like pregnancy could be a dangerous thing because there's so many things that could go wrong in the meantime, right? So obviously also double check your facts and all of that. But it's just a simple example I wanted to give about if you want to personalize just what is possible, and tech makes that possible. Data, well, the tech without the data means absolutely, it's like having a car, no fuel. So you do want both, but it does help a lot with that. So that's where I see it, Tanya. It's really amazing. It's very important because people expect that, right?
Yes.
They don't want to be just a number. They want to know that you care about them, that you're interested in them, and nothing speaks to that like personalization.
And I think, again, without making this a marketing webinar and or social media webinar or anything like that, but there are certain generations. Again, we've picked this up when we did research now recently, like a Generation Z person. And I suppose I think it's Generation Alpha would be those that then after Generation Z, the very young, the new youngsters. But they obviously follow people that's very authentic on social media. There was a statistic recently that said that a Generation Z woman or female will not make any cosmetic purchase if it's not recommended by an influencer. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, that you literally go and, live that part of your life to such an extent that you follow people, right? But so that's on a marketing side. But then I realize now exactly what you say is true. There are certain generations that these personalization tips and the efforts that you will put into your personalization campaigns or strategy, if you are potentially going to have to one day have them as your clients, you are now going to slowly perhaps start moving into that space, understanding the lingo of how to talk to them, how to personalize your content for them. And I suppose that's where personalization can also then play a huge role if you start to consider the next generation. So that's, for me, was just a very interesting point. And I think it's valuable that you mentioned it like this. But one thing that I also wanted to then come back to is scalability. You mentioned here that you cannot necessarily scale without the tech. Have you found that it makes a practice more efficient when they then use certain tech, use certain scalability methods, use client segmentation? What have you seen perhaps in the industry?
Yeah, so definitely, and there's a very simple reason for it. The reason is that there's focus. So everything is focused on servicing that types of clients. You're not just going to have one segment. There's going to be several different segments. You're going to have a value proposition for each one of those segments, and you're going to have a very specific service proposition for each one of those. Because there's still this belief around like everybody needs to get the same service, and I find this from discussions, not from stats or science or any data to back it up. Just literally, when I make a statement like that, to help people respond. And typically your older advisors, in terms of the people that's been in the industry for a long time, that's come before phase even, and those kind of very early days of phase, and that they are typically like, you help everyone because you never know what's going to come from that. You never know what's going to come across. Maybe they win the lottery. Maybe they inherit. Maybe. So there's not a lot of, we just want to help everybody. We want to build relationships with everybody. The bigger the pool, it's a numbers game. So the bigger the pool, the better the chance that I'm going to be able to do business with them. The other side of that coin is like being hyper focused around, and not just niching down, or hate niching, but you need to understand a big enough market group that you can help and want to work with. And then within that, you can niche. So again, like that's where segmentation actually comes in. So for me, it's about, I guess, thinking that if I'm very clear on what I do for that segment of my client base, all my systems, processes, tech, data, like people, everything speaks to that. And the same with this segment, the same with this segment. And you can have the same people delivering to the different segments. You don't need like teams of people or things depending on the size of your business. But because of that, you become more efficient. Because it also, funny enough, becomes a lot easier to say no. Although, so we did a session last week on Tuesday to a big group, and we were talking about lead gen strategies and things like that. And one of the things I mentioned was that you shouldn't. That I don't like referrals. I think referrals it's one of the ways to grow, and it's been successful for many people. I'm more of an advocacy kind of person. And to just notice, like, because I said, because what happens, let's say, Tanya, that you refer somebody to me that's now not within my segmentation philosophy. They're not an ideal client. It's not someone that I would typically want to work with. We had a lot of comments saying, but I can't say no, because what is it going to do to my existing relationship, and all those kind of things. All very valid comments. And I sort of sat down and thought about it a little bit, and then obviously responded back, because some of the stuff was sent to me afterwards as well. It's not about the saying no. It's about how you say no and whether you're offering alternatives. So do you have a plan when somebody is not it's not about leaving them hanging and say, Tanya, I'm sorry, I don't think we're the best people to help you, but good luck on your journey. Like, that's not what you want to do, right? You even want to create an experience through telling them that, this is we're not a good fit. And you never ever want to say that, but I mean, we know that that's what it is. And I think that's ultimately what it boils down to, so you will be more effective and efficient and productive when you are focused, and when you filter out the people you shouldn't be, but then have somewhere to send those people. So have a relationship with other advisors, or maybe it's not you in your firm. Maybe you have other advisors that work with you, and maybe there's another personality in your business that's more suited to look after them. So just have a plan for those situations. But if we have all of these things in place, like efficiency, productivity, all of those things will definitely go up.
Maybe another, it feels like I'm the whole time heading towards the marketing angle of client segmentation, but often when you put out, let's say you are a young advisor and you might call yourself a finfluencer, and you are on social media. Do you think client segmentation can also increase client engagement? In the sense that if you use certain marketing tactics because you've now segmented your client, now it puts out certain content that you potentially can have a higher client engagement because you had, let's say, the right content at the right time. Do you think there are any proof that could potentially work?
No, definitely. But also, just think about it. Let's just go back to the bare essence of why we are segmenting. Segmentation is about knowing exactly who we're working with at a particular point in time. And who we're working with includes who are we communicating with, who are we delivering service to, who are we adding value to, what matters to them, because we're not going to do things for them that don't matter to them, because that's like just wasting everybody's time. So because of that, that's why there would be higher engagement, because you're talking to that one specific person. So segmentation is the thing that goes into every single aspect of your business. Whether it's the advice you're giving, it's the process, the onboarding, like all of it, like the entire business runs through that filter of segmentation. It is the starting point for many things, because the way that I onboard, let's just say that part of my segmentation is stage of life. Okay, so we have people that are close to or in retirement, or we have people who just started working. I mean, those are literally at the two different spectrums of that scale. The way I onboard somebody who's about to retire is probably going to be very different than the way that I onboard somebody who's just started working, simply because there's a lot less information to gather on this end. There's a lot more information to gather on that end. There's more complexity to understand on this end. There's probably less complexity to understand here. The focus here is building a long-term relationship. That's probably the focus, although there's other things that go into that. And on this end, we're really trying to build trust as quickly as possible, and then a long-term relationship. Although, I mean, the long-term relationship is not nearly as long as this one, but the profitability here initially is a lot higher than on this side, but the lifetime value from here to there is a lot. So it's all these things that we need to consider. And I believe that if we focus on that, that's really why we want to do segmentation, is to understand who are we busy with at this point in time versus, at somebody else, because that's just at the heart of business, isn't it? I think it was Steve, what's his name? I almost said Steve Bezos. That's not the same guy as Steve Jobs. Jeff Bezos. He was saying he was being grilled because they remember when Amazon launched, they were launched as an internet business, right? So remember the late 90s. So it was all about tech and internet and all of those things. And this particular journalist or interviewer, whoever he was grilling Jeff Bezos because they were opening all these logistical centers, warehouses, and buying cars and things to deliver things and all that kind of stuff. He says, but the analysts and your investors, they want you to be an internet company. I says, but we are. I said, yeah, but you're doing all these things. I said, yeah, but what we're doing is we're obsessing over the customer. We're obsessing over how we can deliver and service our customer. And then this guy kept on coming at different angles. Yeah, but you're not an internet business, but we're obsessing over the customer. And that's what segmentation is. Segmentation helps you really understand the client. And, it's also, as much as we sit down and analyze the data we have, it's also about gathering new data all the time to add to that conversation through our reviews and our conversations and our communications and things with clients as well. So the big question is, where are we keeping those all that information that we gather? But anyway, so hopefully that answers your question, Tanya.
It does, and but it also made me think of something else now, in the sense that, do you think a client segmentation strategy is almost like a live plan? It's the whole time something that you need to revisit and reevaluate.
Yeah, definitely. In the beginning, it's going to be a lot of work. I don't know if you've ever heard the story of the pump that Zig Ziglar tells, but he tells the story of this, on the farms in all those, before we had like boreholes and things with like electrical pumps that would pump water from under the ground and all that. There was this hand pump. And when you wanted to pump water, you had it was a lot of effort, and you were pumping and there's no water coming out. And the point was, when you stopped, all the water went down. But once the water started coming out, it was just a smooth little, just a rhythmic sort of way just to keep that stream of water flowing. Now, that's a fantastic analogy to think about any part of your business, particularly segmentation. So initially, it's going to be a lot of work. But all you're really doing is to checking whether this is still valid, whether you're not redoing the entire process. So it's a living thing. Anything in your business plan, your marketing, anything is living. It evolves slowly but surely over time, sometimes quickly. But once you've got your segmentation philosophy, unless you're very unhappy with it, you can scrap it tomorrow. That's the beauty of being in business or running your own practice. Just scrap it and start from scratch. There's nothing wrong with that. But once you've taken the time, that effort, pump, and there's no water, until you start seeing the water, it becomes a much easier process just to maintain and adjust. It becomes about tweaking later on. It's not about, because the reason why you will be able to do that is because of the new data that you get, new conversations you have, new information you get. It's not like, obviously, if you're pivoting into, because one of the things we often find is that people say, I so want to work with business clients, but they find it hard to get into that space. But if you want to get into that space, you're going to have to do a new segment for that and start to understand them. So there will be a lot of work again. But other than that, once you've got it, and that's the beauty about a philosophy. This is the one thing that you think about, different investment houses, for example. If you have an investment house that changes their philosophy every year or every 3 years, then you're not going to be happy. This is one of the biggest ways you can really differentiate yourself as well, is through being very clear who you help, how you help them, what's important to them, what their challenges are, how you deliver value to them. This is what this is all about. And this is the thing that will differentiate you from all the other financial advisors in your area or in South Africa now that we're virtual. It's because you're very clear on who you help. And when I say Tanya, if you were looking somewhere else just now, you'd be looking straight, because we know that we're talking to you. So for me, that's really what it's about. And yes, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, it's absolutely a living thing. Yeah.
And I think what I realized is that the client segmentation is also a journey that you will typically take for yourself, because like you say, you will realize who you do not want to work with, the type of person you are, your own personalities, your own biases. So it's not just I suppose, a business strategy. It's also perhaps a bit of a personal development angle, and which is maybe a good thing in a sense, because you should not be scared or afraid then to say no to certain clients or certain business, because you know it will, like you say, it could drain your energy, could potentially harm your well-being in a sense, because you deal with these clients, and it will constantly be such a drag to have to meet the clients or have a review with the client. So I think it's such a valuable process for self-discovery as well.
I fully agree.
I am just going to make a note here to our audience members. We are also going to send you guys, or there will be a downloadable version of some of the methods that you could consider. So this is by no means all of them, but there are some that we found in our research that's called the tiered ranking segmentation. So it's very much your old way to say there's a platinum, a gold status, a silver status, a bronze. I mean, like I mentioned, by no means this is set in stone. It's something you can try and use if you just after a little bit of let's say a segmentation blueprint, you're welcome to use this. There's a very interesting one, the scored ranking segmentation, that's also on the document that you will receive, where you can decide to use certain attributes like revenue, the referral potential, wealth trajectory of a client, the required time and resources that you need to spend on your client. And then you put a scoring next to that in order to determine your client as well. And one of the last ones then is that what we've touched on is behavioral element that you can include. So what's the client's risk tolerance? How do they like to be communicated, or the methods that you need to use? How involved do they want to be in their financial plan? I think, Francois, you alluded to that earlier. Those that can actually make a decision, take action. What do your clients value? And then also, what are your firm's capabilities? And I think it brings back to almost discovering yourself. Can you service that client? Do you actually have the capabilities, the expertise, the staff, whatever, to be able to service a certain client? So that will all be on the blueprint that's also available for you. But then maybe to come back then to our discussion here, I would like to ask you, do you think that it can reduce business risk if you have a proper client segmentation strategy?
Oh, definitely. Because if I just work with the people I should be working with and who I can add value to and who I really deeply and thoroughly understand, that massively reduces the risk. Because where do your complaints come from? Where do the issues come from? It's from people who, like you would 9 out of 10 times probably go like, I never should have taken, not because of like just you knew instinctively when you took them on, I should not be taking on this client. And I think that's the biggest reason why this will reduce your business and your advice risk from that point of view. Because some people, if they're not a good fit, they will always have a way of finding something that was wrong. And this is the big lesson I learned, Tanya, over many years. And one thing that many people don't know about me is that I was in practice. So it's not like I'm just coming from a theoretical background. I saw this in practice, that I always say this thing about like money has no friends or family. So when it comes to money, people will do anything and say anything and throw anyone under the bus if it means that they could save money or get money or do things like that. So I say that loosely, I say that with respect, but if you don't have the right clients and you build the right relationship with them, the other ones are going to be the ones that add risk to your business. So I definitely agree with that it reduces the risk in your business.
And I think maybe a last point here to make is that a lot of people on the call may ask, are there really any proof that client segmentation worked? And by proof, the rand and cents, can my business? And I must say, after doing some research prior to this, I found that, and this is now, unfortunately, most of these stats are typically for US companies, but that firms with no client segmentation strategies had a typical AUM of, let's say, $1.4 million. And then those with a client segmentation strategy had an AUM of $2.5 million. So they also saw 74% AUM growth over a period of 5 years. And then also the percentage of their high net worth clients, this was for me very interesting, because the segmentation did not just work in terms of growing your AUM, but also growing perhaps that high net worth section of your book. They had their high net worth growth was 28%, those with the strategy, and those without was only 16%. So obviously, if you grow your high net worth, you grow your AUM, you grow your commissions that you earn or your fees that you earn. So I think for those who might have had the question on here today, whether there's proof that it works, unfortunately, like I said, this is US stats, but I assume, Francois, you would probably have seen, maybe not the statistics, but you would have, like you said, chatted to advisors that have maybe told you or shared with you stories of that it actually works in the South African landscape as well. And I don't think our market is necessarily different than what you would pick up in the US.
Absolutely. I was in a session a couple of weeks ago where I was presenting, but before me there was another presenter, and they've built quite a prolific business. And the reason why they've done that is because they were very clear on their segmentation. They were very clear on the market that they're going after, and they have the way that they work things. And what they've done is they've put other things in place to deal with the clients who don't fit. So think about something like, Auto and General, Budget, First for Women, Verseker. All those companies, exactly, it's the same insurer. I don't know who knew that, but it's exactly the same insurer. But what they've done is they've really, honed in on a specific segment of the entire market. So are they going after the entire market? Yes, but how are they doing it? Very focused, very segmented, very like they understand that market and they put something together just for that market. A big lesson in segmentation. So it's absolutely a thing. And, for many of us, it feels like I was telling a story to a friend of mine on Sunday. I said to him, like one of the biggest things that always for me is like, because I'm all about helping people. I want to change lives at scale. Like, well, this is what we want to do. But I can't charge for that because how can I help and earn money? Like these two things feels like it just don't go together. And that's maybe a big reason also for many of us, because this is a very servant kind of profession, right? This is where you really, you look after the heart and soul of a family. You look after the thing that makes everything else possible or not. So there's a lot of responsibility. So there's the majority, the far, if not almost all, and I have to unfortunately say almost all, because we know that there's always like the bad apples amongst us, but genuinely care about the people they work with. They genuinely have their best interest at heart. And sometimes we feel like, but because of that, I'm not allowed to say that I only work with high net worth clients, or that you need a certain sort of, or you need to comply with a certain profile before we can help you, for example. And we feel bad doing that. Just like I felt bad charging people for doing a great job and changing their lives. It's the same thing until I watched a particular person present on stage. And he was there when he's emotional, he's really into it. You can see that everything comes from what's inside of him, but yet he's making like millions and millions and millions of dollars doing that. And I'm just thinking like, but that is what it's about. So if you do it well, you change someone's life, then why don't you do that? So if you help a particular client and that particular client is better for your business than another client, then why not do that? But ultimately, it's a very personal decision. It's something that you need to decide what you want to do. And there isn't a right or a wrong. Just understand that whatever your philosophy is, whatever your plan is, that comes with certain outcomes. And if you're happy with that, because remember, you need to get married to your decisions, not your outcomes. So if you're finding that you're working hard, you've got to see a lot of people, but you're not really making money, it could be because of the people that we're helping. But if that gives you all of the satisfaction and all of the fulfillment and all of the things that you aspire to, the money part of the business, it matters, because obviously FSCA cares whether you do a good job or not from that point of view. But ultimately, that's not the thing that drives you. So just be very clear also, and I think this is what you alluded to when you were talking about the personal development aspect of things, is that you learn a lot about yourself and why are some things important to you and why are some things not important to you, and go with that, because those are the kinds of people that you will also attract in the process. So it's not just a case of, being very hard and say, oh, you need 5 million rand before we even talk to you. And like, you can do it that way. There's businesses that do it that way. But for most of us, that's probably not the way for us to do it. But it's a very important aspect. Yeah.
And I think that's a very good ending to our session, the way you have framed it now, and to say that there's no right or wrong. It is about your philosophy. And I think that is the core of a value proposition, in a sense, for me as well, is that you cannot build your value proposition on someone else's values. You need to understand your value that you offer. And if you have a value, I think it's maybe a side note here and maybe a very good closing point. If you can show client value, then price obviously is not something that they will start to question. And I mean, that's a whole nother discussion on fees, but then suddenly just, take this maybe as a mental note to say that, the fee debate that always comes up. If you show proper value, then fees are typically not something that you will need to always defend with your clients. So, but in any case, Francois, I really appreciate that you made some time to come and change the lives of our advisors as well. And yes, again, I'm going to just mention to everyone, please go and as a starting point, just on a Friday morning, 8 o'clock, if you're playing golf or something else, stop doing that. Have a look at PROpulsion, watch PROpulsion. But if you can't do it live, it's a YouTube channel. These things are, you can view it afterwards as well. But get in touch with Francois and his team. Go and see what they do. They've got some amazing tech get-togethers and conferences in that space. They do a lot for the next gen and work with younger advisors, work with new advisors. And so it has been lovely to have you on the call. And I hope some of our advisors that may be new to the PROpulsion name will actually go and follow you as well. So thank you so much, Francois, and thank you for everyone who attended the call this morning.
Thank you very much, Tanya. It was a privilege.